The Celestial Plane. A plane that is inhabited by angelic beings and celestial creatures, as well as some other folk, as you may see on the screen right here. This is the topic of our video today. I think appropriate is to start where you might start in a Conquest of Elysium game when thinking about the Celestial Plane, is how the hell do I get here? Hell being somewhat of a joke there, given we're talking about the Celestial Plane. And I'm here to inform you of a couple of ways. One way that is likely not to be used a lot, spoilers for the void here, are these well springs. These or sacred springs, they can take you to Elysium proper as well as probably some other strange places from what I've seen. The sacred springs will take you, though. One of them will be present that will take you to the Celestial Plane. You'll show up in one of these sacred springs. Usually there aren't any angelic beings sitting on there from what I've observed. Yet I would be careful. As you can see here, the occasional horror does slip in to the Celestial Plane, along with phase spiders, phase beasts, and anything else that roams the void. The next way in is through the Primal Plane, and we'll talk about the Primal Plane as well as the void in another video, but all you need to know for this one is that there will be a portal always here that you can get to and go in if you can get past this garrison, either by fighting it. As you can see, it's quite a mighty garrison here with a harbinger, a couple of angelic warriors, an archangel, and as far as I'm concerned, they will always have a bless of +8 hit points, +1 strength, and +2 morale. Although the hit point bonus does vary based on the unit. You'll see these angelic warriors only have a +6. And so you'll have to either fight this, or you could fly past on the water, or if you have amphibious units, get past into the Celestial Plane. These are your options as far as portals go through the other planes. The only other access that is definite that you could perhaps get is if you come across a scroll of heavenly ascension that will teleport you to the Celestial Plane. Now, in my experience, I've only teleported onto land, but having played around with other scrolls, I have been teleported into lava, at least, by the infernal scrolls, so while I may have been lucky, it could be the possibility that it teleports you elsewhere. I've only been teleported onto land, though, so that is my reporting on the matter. Those are the three ways that I am aware of to definitively get to the Celestial Plane. If you're aware of any events I haven't experienced or seen talked about on the Conquest of Elysium 5 Discord or Steam forum, feel free to say so in the comments below, but these are the ways that I have gotten to the Celestial Plane, with the most reliable and ease for most factions being getting through the Primal Plane, and for the specific factions that have void sanity, like the High Cultist, or some way to reduce insanity, finding a sacred spring in the void is always an option, although I'd highly suggest using your Elder Lich Abominations and your Angler Queens to get there, as that will be the speediest way. You won't be seeing, as I do, the plane as it fully is, which we can get into now. I have scried plenty of this. I believe there's also ways to rip images off of it and post them in places, but as far as in-game goes, we have scried most of the plane to get this view. We haven't walked around. As you can see, the outer ring is, of course, surrounded by the void. As most planes are, the void surrounds them. Keeping in the plane, keeping everything solid, I suppose, is likely this ring of flames. Of course, if you don't have fire resistance or regeneration, the ring of flames will start to burn your units, kind of like the magma in the Inferno or the fire in the elemental plane of fire. Once we look to the next ring, we see a ring of clouds. Of course, your movement will be slow here, but they're not ever unstable. So you won't have the same issue that you do in the sky of perhaps falling through into the void or Elysium proper when we're talking about the sky. Instead, you have a solid ring of clouds that'll just slow you down a bit. Then we have the Ring of the Sea. It's important to note that I have yet to see any creatures really delve into this place here. I've only seen creatures on the continent proper. It's possible horrors could maybe work their way over here, or angelic beings if they ever wandered, but there's only a few wandering angelic creatures, and they are few and far between. You can see some here with Murik, Munker, and Narker? Why does it have two names? That's a little strange. The Archangel. Perhaps that's some mythos thing I'm missing out on in mythology when it comes to celestial beings. But what we can say is that really the continent proper is really where creatures are. The sea and clouds do mean, and the fire do mean, that any rituals that require these kinds of tiles will be here, although, as my experience here is with the High Cultist in terms of stepping onto the plane, there are no deep sea provinces amongst the sea, only regular sea, so you want to keep that in mind. Clouds, though, mean perhaps you could build a citadel with an air warlock if you could ever get a scroll of heavenly ascension. That may give you a base up here. Beyond that, we're going to talk about the units present on this plane as well as their homes. We'll start off down here at the Bronze Castle. We've already talked about the angelic warriors. I give good breakdowns of what I think about some of these units in my L run-through, as most of the units here are shared by L, either controllable or summonable, and leaving the rest of Elysium to rot when we talk about things like the Apocalyptic Riders. When we look at the angelic warriors, they're going to be pretty tough to get through. They have good awe, they have paladin magic, so they're going to end up with things like Godflesh, meaning they're going to be resistant to most physical damage, and they have 9 magic resistance, so most magical damage isn't going to do much to them. Frankly, the thing I've found best to try and conquer this plane with is the Elderlich abominations that have crazy regenerative abilities, high morale, and they also have life drain tentacles and a death gaze. So they're going to be pretty resistant to most of the things here if you can mass a couple of them, although very expensive. But you can see here, you'll see the occasional bishop and other unit. They're not too crazy, they'll die. It's just more thematically why they're here. On a note with the bishop, the plane does describe itself perhaps as being a place for those free of sin, as well as angelic beings. Now, that is debatable, as many of you on the Discord have talked about how you've seen brigands here. Now, perhaps those brigands were truly free of sin, but that may play into a larger debate of what L, and by extension Ilwinter, believes to be free of sin, or it could all be phooey, and really, we aren't free of sin to get to the celestial plane. After all, we were able to get here through a portal, so maybe these brigands were just lucky enough to have stumbled upon a scroll of heavenly ascension and made their way up here. I think it's an interesting debate to be had, why there are horrors, brigands, and, of course, the occasional bear in the celestial plane. Of course, perhaps this is the only non-slothful bear, but his tags of Deep Sleeper and Snoozer would be debating that away, I think. But moving forward, we can see flaming swords. There's not too much to talk about there. Many harbingers, so lots of storm magic, divine magic, and the seraphs, which are a scary thing to behold, because they have 4 awe, high magic resistance, and level 3 pyromancy and divine magic. Although, if you've ever played with level 3 pyromancy, that can sometimes mean they're going to meteor their own people, and meteors do not spare them either, so they will certainly kill some of their own units with that physical damage. The Apocalyptic Riders sit here. Again, we talked about these in our L run more thoroughly, but essentially they are big, dangerous beasts, with this one having blood vengeance, famine, and famine magic tends to summon things, not that scary actually as a path of magic. You have death, who can make all your troops undead, so if you ever come here surprisingly with a human faction, death will basically just destroy you with strikes anywhere, 9 strikes onto your troops. You also have a war rally and things like it. You have the plague apocalyptic rider who will disease the entire battlefield. Funnily enough, most of the time I've seen his citadel, his bronze castle, which we'll talk about those in a little bit, they have saints in them, in archers, which means that his mist of disease will almost certainly disease all these archers because it hits the entire battlefield, not just his enemies. Beyond that, he has his plague bow, and he's very dangerous to sit next to, so they are all in danger of getting diseased, particularly these human people. The Saints are a little more resistant with their high magic resistance, but they're almost useless. It is funny seeing around the Celestial Plane plenty of these Saints will sit in fortresses. These are actually some of the easiest fortresses to take because the threats are actually the flaming swords and angelic beings, with the Saints being next to useless. You know, there are plenty of units here to talk about. The angels, the archangels, you can see them here. The seraphs. There are some discrepancies here with named seraphs and non-named seraphs. I'm guessing these have to do with something in mythology that I'm just not picking up on. You can feel free to say so in the comments below. There are some named archangels as well. This is actually the only Templar I've seen here so far, and so I am guessing Templars aren't actually that holy, according to Illwinter, because they seem to not show up very often. Now, you'll see that scattered throughout here are the occasional village and whatnot. You may want to be here for a couple of reasons. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. Of course, most of this will be time-stamped on the video, so you might skip there. But you can see compositions of these units form things like celestial lions and whatnot, and those apocalyptic riders. Importantly, if you do end up taking any of these bronze castles, you will find that some of the other units on the plane will attempt to come retake it from you, so be prepared to fight off wave after wave. I think while I'm saying this, I'll have put up a video of me trying to fight them off. I'll also have put a video somewhere in here of me maybe fighting one of these guys, probably right now. Now, these guys are no joke, but with some big old regeneration stacks with high magic resistance and life drain tentacles, I think you'll find you could take them out. It's up to you to find the other combinations. I think one of the reasons you might want to be here is to explore and try and figure out how you can conquer some of these very dangerous citadels. Now, it's not actually that dangerous of a plane overall before you've taken a bronze citadel. The faction tends to sit where they are. Unlike the Inferno, things don't jump after you usually, so you'll be pretty safe just coming up here for a look at least. Now, we'll transition into resources and usefulness of some of this stuff. Of course, there are towns. These towns do come with the regular hands of glory, sacrifices and whatnot, trade and gold that they always come with. They're scattered around here. The same applies for the villages. There's nothing unique about them in particular. Now, the Bronze Castle does not, from my experience, allow you to recruit anything. I suppose you could look at the Bronze Castle, interestingly enough, having higher hit points and shock resistance as something unique, though. But ultimately, more the Bronze Citadels would be just for the challenge of grabbing them, or perhaps depriving the L player of ever getting his apocalyptic riders, although I don't know how reliable that is really, because at the end of the day, if you can get up to the Celestial Plane, unless you get a Scroll of Heavenly Ascension, you've probably been able to conquer most of L already. Or if you can summon these things, why not just fight them outside of their citadels? Now, there is one particular tile that I think is worth it to come here for. And by worth it, I mean would be worth it if it didn't have the units it had in it. I haven't been talking about this, but the Divine Castle. Now you can see here, the Divine Castle has the special little glowing wall thing you see there, which I believe means that these bronze, silver, and golden walls are what are unique. with the golden walls having the highest hit point, I believe, wall in the game that I've seen. They're pretty strong walls. But beyond that, this fortress is somewhat insane. It is the only fortress I've seen in this plane to contain orphans, which are big fire bombers with non-magic invulnerability, and essentially magic invulnerability when we look at their 11 magic resistance. They are a tough nut to crack. Also, with a fire shield of 5, physical damage is a little bit off the table, even if you have magic damage, because unless you have spectral archers, you're going to be taking a lot of damage from these guys. This thing is a beast to try and fight. It is held by the unique unit called the Great Archon, which, funnily enough, I've done reading on the Discord about, and someone was able to charm it somehow and learn that the ritual caster is actually druidic spells. So they have druidism as a spell school. So if you could ever grab this guy, you would be able to summon particular animals and whatnot with him. Now, the Great Archon seems to be maybe the choice champion of El. I am who I am. Thou shalt say unto the children of Elysium, I am hath sent me unto you. Now, who the Great Archon is a bit of a mystery beyond that. I would actually say that El is not a real thing, and perhaps the Great Archon is truly the representation of what El truly is. But then I guess he is El, just with a different name. Because we see no El in the celestial sphere. So where the heck is El? Is he in the void? What is El? Is he the celestial sphere itself? Could we make a face out of this? I don't think so. So I think the Great Archon is truly El himself. But that is up for all of you to debate. The unit is quite insane. With Divine Magic level 3 and Gold Arcana level 3, he will be quite the challenge here in the back line. Now, if you can make it up to him even past those spells and his entire garrison of Celestial Lions, Seraphs, Orphans, and Angelic Warriors, those being the biggest threats sitting here, then you would come upon a Flail of Guidance that can fear your troops and does massive damage, a Serpent of Knowledge which feeble-minds anything next to it, so magic users or those trying to keep good magic resistance would be potentially taken away, all of these negating only with great difficulty. And the Serpent of Wisdom, which could confuse the units that attacks the Great Archon. And range magic attacks, of course, aren't going to do a lot, as he has high magic resistance. He doesn't have great armor, but again, the threat is that you have to get close to him to really kill him in these situations, because his shield even is magic, so it reduces the damage from bows quite a bit, and slings. And as it says, similar weapons, so I believe javelins are knocked in there as well. So quite the big fortress. I actually haven't taken this myself. It is possible you could recruit units here. I don't believe so. If I were to try and take it, I think really you should answer the question for yourself on that one. I think this is one of the reasons you might want to come here, because it gives a gold bonus across all of Elysium, and anything else that gives gold you've conquered. With that's what that 3 gold symbol means. So it could be worth it to get if you want to get insane amounts of gold, especially if you're on the monarchy age, then you can grab both. I don't know if they stack. I'd like to know. Let us know in the comments below. It would take far too long, and this video would never be out if I was to try both. But quite a good tile if you're able to capture it from the Great Archon. But would you even want to kill the Great Archon? He seems to be one of the creatures keeping order in all of Elysium with his El faction. Although, I suppose you could also say the El faction is likely to bring on the apocalypse, so maybe he is the great nuisance of Elysium, or the great enemy that Elysium needs to slay to truly be free of the presence of the celestial entities that don't appear to be that good. After all, we don't see a lot of humans here. Now, this brings us to the portion of the video where we talk about why you would ever go to the celestial plane. I think there are very few reasons to go here beyond your own exploration interests. I think it's a really cool place to go. I think it can be really fun to look around and try and see if you can defeat the apocalyptic riders in their citadels and claim the celestial plane, essentially becoming a god for yourself. No really recruitable units that I can see coming from here, so there's not any interest on the resource front because the towns and bronze castles and villages that you could get are accessible in other planes or just Elysium proper if you're just looking to conquer. The third and final reason I could think to come here is bragging rights to say you've made it. I think it's fun to say I've been one of the people to make it to this plane. I don't think everyone does. It's not one of the easier planes to access, as we'll talk about in some of our other videos. I think ultimately showing off your great Archon battle on YouTube or on the Discord would be a cool thing to do, but perhaps not worth everyone's time with specific factions. You know, it is quite hard to get here unless you are a warlock or the high cultist or something else that can make it through the void or get to the primal plane. Which, if you've ever seen the chart on the Discord, it is made quite interesting. We'll talk about that chart probably when we speak about the Nexus, I assume. But I might pop it up on the screen here. The chart on the Discord is made by a user called Ember. That is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool chart. I think it's mostly accurate. It shows essentially how to get to each plane without any player interaction, so not creating portals and whatnot. Which indicates that you can only get here through the void and through the primal plane, which I believe to be true without player interaction, which I think the only other player interaction you can have to get here is through the Heavenly Scrolls of Ascension. Otherwise, you have to make your way through a variety of different planes to get here. That path would look something like getting, as like, say, the Warlock. You'd have to get to the Elemental Plane, and then use the Elemental Plane to piggyback onto the Primal Plane, then getting from the Primal Plane to the Celestial Plane. Otherwise, you'd have to go through the Void, which again requires Void Sanity, although if you have some level of Void Sanity, some way to navigate that, then you will be able to get here probably easiest, because you could go straight to the Sacred Springs in the Void and make your way through there, which are undefended, unlike the Bronze Castle in the Primal Plane that we've shown to you already. Quite an interesting plane. This video is coming in at 22 minutes, so I think we're going to stop here. I hope you enjoyed. As always, put any more information you've discovered about the Celestial Plane for yourself in the comments below, and be sure not to destroy the gateways, as all the gateways are able to be destroyed if you choose to lock the planes behind you. Meaning, there's very little access besides the Scrolls of Heavenly Ascension. Beyond that, make sure to like and comment if you enjoyed, and talk about how you enjoyed it or liked it. Thank you for watching, and I hope your planar travels on Elysium are successful, as always. And check out some of our other Conquest of Elysium 5 content. We overview the factions at the end of all of our runs, and so you'll get a little tidbit of information, perhaps that you didn't have before, or maybe you did. I could always be wrong. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on our planar travels.